Hello there, fellow rethinker. Joe Earle is the Chief Executive of Economy, which is a UK-based charity that works together with communities and individuals to make them aware that they are a part of the economy. Together, they work on the local issues and come up with solutions. We talk about what it takes to be and train a trainer, how they reach local communities, and the skills you need to have a good company culture. Of course, we discuss a whole range of other things, but for that, we welcome you into the conversation. Happy to have you rethink with us. Enjoy. Hey, Joe, it's so nice to have you here. So, what have you been up to?
I'm in the UK. I'm in London. We've been having a lockdown, so not much. Going out for some exercise, and I've been using the opportunity to do lots of work.
Nice. So, before we started chatting, you said that you had some books around. What are you reading and why are you reading these at the moment?
Oh, good question. Well, I've got Rethinking the Economics of Land and Housing here. I've got the Globalization Paradox here. I've got this good book here. Anyway, this is all very this is like what people do when they are on Zoom and they have their bookshelf behind them to show how clever they are. So I'm going to stop showing off my books. I've not read all of them, but yeah, I'm just using this time, start of the year to just try and do some reading, do some thinking about where the work I'm involved in is at and where we need to go. Yeah, how the pandemic kind of changes things and what the next steps are.
Okay, so you are the head of economy.org. So, can you explain a bit about what that is and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So Economy is a charity based in the UK. It came out of Rethinking Economics, which is the international student movement. I was involved in Post-Crash Economic Society at Manchester. I was there between 2011 and 2014. And then while we were kind of, I guess, campaigning for curriculum reform there, we felt that even if we changed economics and how it was taught in universities, there was still this bigger problem of the role of economics in society and how the broader public in the UK, in our case, felt about the economy and whether they felt able to influence the economy or whether they felt like it was this big thing that was just out of their control, too complicated, other people make the decisions and, there's nothing I can do. And we wanted to address that feeling that we saw in our kind of friends and family, and we saw in how people talked about in the media and politics. And yeah, we started off by calling it democratize economics. We wanted to democratize economics, and that led to Economy being set up. Our mission is to support people to shape the economy to achieve what matters to them. And we really particularly focus on communities who are currently like further from power. But we also work with economic experts and decision makers to say to them, there's a different way of doing economics. It can be more participatory. And if you're making policies that affect people, you really need to work with them and yeah, do that better. And also with economists to say, look, you're going to understand the economy much better if you talk to people and actually have that kind of different forms of kind of creating knowledge. And so yeah, that's the kind of basis of what we're doing and why we think it's important. And yeah, maybe we can talk a bit more about how we achieve that, but that's the core.
That is amazing. So, what do you mean with communities that are further from power?
Yeah, I guess it's just recognizing that in the UK and I think in all countries to differing extents, there's a certain distribution of you could say economic power. So that's ability to shape um, shape the economy. So, that's the ability to influence what economic policies we might pursue, both at a national government level, a local government level. It might be ability to articulate in public your views on the economy or your experience of the economy. Some people have much more access to um, being able to express their views than others. It might be about, yeah, even shaping how we think about the economy, because we know that how we think about the economy shapes how we act and what we think is possible. And some people have more opportunity to to use economic knowledge, to create economic knowledge, to go and study economics, whereas others in the UK who don't go to university or who don't study economics don't necessarily have that same power. So yeah, we very much want to try to rebalance that power, so that, I think this is fundamental thing that, everybody should have that ability to, to be part of the conversation about what our economy is like and what kind of economy we want, but also to be part of creating policies, to be part of actually, participating. So yeah, that's what we mean by communities furthest from power.
Okay. And so how do you go about doing that then? Do you teach them about other ideas in economics, or like what do you do with these communities?
Well, I guess one thing is, so yeah, so like communities, I think we normally think of like people in a place, like a town or, an area. But I guess we think of communities also in terms of communities of interest. So it might be, I don't know, people who are really part of a group, a sports club, or a parenting group, or all sorts of kind of different kinds of communities. Also like communities of identity, so people from particular backgrounds who see themselves. So yeah, so it's quite a kind of broad idea. And so I guess what the first challenge is convincing people who don't have economic power that actually economics is something that is worthwhile relating to, and people who are struggling in the day to day potentially, and where economics feels like, oh, it's this luxury, oh, it's this, it's got this complicated jargon, why should I even bother with it? And the way that we do that is we build relationships with organizations and individuals who maybe are kind of like connectors, we call kind of champions. So people who see how broader economies have an impact on their community, but also have really good kind of close trusting relationships with their communities, because we found from experience they're the kind of people who can help us start the conversation. And if you just do this kind of open call out, then you get the people who are already interested. If you do an open call out, you get people who've done degrees in economics or maybe politics. You get people who are professionals, who have quite a lot of kind of spare time. Maybe they're older, they're kind of fairly, they don't have to worry about day to day meeting their basic needs. And so it's like, oh, I'll just go along to an economics event. And so there's lots that caters for that group, and our aim is definitely to go beyond that group. Then once we've kind of started off the conversations, I guess it's what do you do in that first conversation? And we very much really flip economics on its head. So where if you learned it at university, you'd start with the abstract principles and theories. We realize that's not going to get you anywhere. So it's very much about, what are the issues which matter to you? Is it, housing? Is it jobs? Is it, food? Is it the environment? And then once you've had that conversation and identified this range of things that matter to people, and it might not, they're all like serious issues, it might be other, much, what might matter to people might be music or culture, or so it doesn't have to be the like serious stuff, although often that is what matters to people. And then once you've got that, then you can link people's kind of individual or kind of community experience to this broader economic system. And you can start drawing those links between, okay, so if housing's the issue, then like how you know how is building of houses happening in this space? What about financialization, and how is that affecting, how are there different groups? So okay, renters and owners, and what is government policy doing? What does the local government do to it does regeneration, or it does like planning? How does it do that? If you want to say we need more houses, or we need a different kind of houses, or we need more affordable houses, then here are the ways that you might articulate that, and here are the people you might want to talk to, here are the organizations who are working in that space, we can connect you up to them. So it's about trying to kind of go on a journey with people from a sense of like alienation and a sense of kind of disconnection to a sense of identity, like, oh, I see I'm part of the economy, I see that power in the economy isn't equal, but I can, you know both myself and through others influence the economy, or with others. So yeah, from a sense of identity to then kind of empowerment and action, to be able to um, shape the economy to achieve what matters to you, whatever way, whatever that is. And we don't see that as our role to say, you should support this policy or you should do that thing. It is very much about trying to kind of support people to do that themselves.
So that is very broad. That's broader than just economics. That is like the whole economy. That is many different aspects. But
Yeah.
how do you know what a community, like how do you figure out which community you can add the most value, and how do you then figure out how you can help them best?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we have this, our mission is to be able to do that at a national level and to be able to offer that support to anyone who wants it. At the moment, we're 7 staff. um, we work across kind of both the kind of education, workshop, discussion, facilitation, and we also have this kind of media side, and this kind of, and then a kind of support changing things. And we're spread across, and then also a bit of schools work too, to work with young people. So we very much, yeah, we can't work with all communities, and we've worked in lots of different parts of the UK, and we're based in London, but we've not done very much work in London at all, and made a conscious decision to work in other parts of the UK because of how lots of people in the UK, if you ask them, how do you think about the economy? A lot of people say, oh, well, it's something that's in London. It's kind of located
Oh,
there
really?
physically. Yeah. It's a really interesting response. And I can completely see why, because of how economic activities concentrated in London, how narratives focus on London, how the media and politics, the UK is very centralized in that way, with lots of focus on London. So yeah, but yeah, that feeling of being, not being in the economy because that's something in London. So yeah, we very much focused outside. So that's one way, that's one kind of criteria that we've started with. And another one, I think it's a mix of kind of strategy and opportunity. So, there's a strategy about wanting to work with diverse groups so that we can learn more about what different groups want, and how to work with different groups, different ages, people from different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds or racial backgrounds, or people. Um, yeah, so that's kind of one thing. So I guess diversity. And then also sometimes it's helped people who are already trying to change something. So people who have an issue in their area that they really care about, because then it's easier to link that to the economy than groups who are maybe not even thinking about a broader social issue. So that's been another way that we found as our way in. But basically we're about 5 years old now. And our next stage and what we're working on is how to scale that work so that we can work with more communities. And because part of this is about we think that you will get kind of broader social change when you start adding up that work rather than doing it in more of an isolated way.
So you're about to scale the unscalable of having local
Yeah, well,
conversations.
yeah, and I guess then there's a big question about how you do that and how you have the resources to do that. We're very clear that we can't do it on our own, and it wouldn't be wise to try to. So our approach is very much about partnerships. But then even, partnerships, great. Lots of people are aligned with what you're doing and you work with them. But even managing a large number of partnerships is very resource intensive. And with what we want to do, it's very much long-term and relational. And so building these kinds of mutual relationships, again, just takes time and energy. So yeah, it's definitely, we don't have all the answers. But we hope we're kind of gradually building it up. And I guess then there's something about, learning from people in other countries. There's definitely kind of people who do this kind of work in the US. And so we're keen to kind of learn from them and what they're doing. And I'm sure in other places too. So there's definitely that kind of international element of learning and sharing learning about what works, but then also recognizing that it's very specific to how different places work and the kind of the economies they have and the cultures they have.
So you're a team of 7. How do you go all across the country to give these trainings? Like, do you go yourself, or is there a structure to this?
Yeah, well, so I mean, there are two answers to that. There's before the pandemic, we
Oh yeah.
we went to places. So yeah, there was a fair bit of traveling. Um, we also trained. We had a kind of train the trainer model. So we would train up community organizers or organizations or volunteers more broadly to run workshops and courses for their communities. And we found that really worked. It really worked to have someone who was maybe more confident with economics, but then someone who was also more of a kind of communicator or teacher or facilitator. And we'd put pairs together and then they would run a course in a community center or some other kind of organization in person. And obviously they were from that place, and so there was much less traveling. So part of what we were doing before was that building of a kind of infrastructure of people who are trained facilitators, and we were then also working with groups to create resources that were very much specific. So, a workshop on the economy of Birmingham, which is a city in the UK, or even like even more local than that, kind of, an area in Birmingham called Perry Bar. What are the economic issues that matter to the community there? And then we'll work with the group to kind of create some resources around that and some workshops, and then train facilitators to do that. So yeah, that kind of decentralized model rather than us doing it all, which of course we can't unless we hire thousands of people, which is never going to happen. So and then obviously now we're in the pandemic and it's all via, video calls. That we've had to like adapt what we do. So we've much more done kind of shorter workshops, because we recognize that people don't necessarily want to come to a whole course and spend a lot of time on the computer more than they're already spending. Also that probably if you're asking people to come to a workshop on the computer, it's maybe more, you're going more for people who are more interested already, so a slightly different audience. So yeah, we've definitely adapted, but hopefully when touch wood we're able to, we will be able to combine those models, so have the in-person model and then also the digital model, because it's really useful being able to do something and have people from different places coming and not have to travel. So there are definitely benefits from the fact that we've developed that model now.
Hmm. So what makes somebody then a good trainer? If you train someone, are there certain skills they need to have, or
Definitely, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think facilitation is such a key skill, and if I was designing a course for economists, it would be a key outcome of that course, because I just think so it's just really kind of symbolic of a different approach to doing economics. So rather than a kind of, I'm an expert and I have an expert body of knowledge and I will go and give advice to, a government minister or the treasury or the local authority, and that will, they will follow that advice or maybe ignore it or whatever. But it's that process of kind of, impartial, objective advice, and the broader sphere is kind of not seen as significant. Whereas I feel like facilitation as a way of as a way of um, as a way of kind of generating economic knowledge about what's actually happening in places, and how people are actually experiencing the economy, and as a way of generating ideas around policies that might solve particular problems, as a way of generating like legitimacy and consensus around economic ideas. It's so important. And I guess then, yeah, what makes a good facilitator? Really good question. I think communication. So the ability to kind of communicate ideas both in a way that's kind of accessible. Um, so not necessarily not using any jargon at all, because jargon has a role and it can and allow specific language to identify specific things. But defining jargon in a way that makes sense, not just accessible communication, but also how to make it relevant. So how to do those things that I was talking about before. So how to kind of draw out from a group what their interests are and then relate your subject matter to those interests, rather than saying, here, this is what I'm here to tell you, and just kind of splurging it. I also think a really good understanding of different techniques and different tools and facilitation techniques, and different ways that groups might learn or engage with a topic, um, but then not just but then adapting those ideas to the group. So are you in a physical space and is the group quite confident, and then can you get the group standing up and doing kind of spectrum lines where they might share, on one end, if they're sharing their views about you know some tax or some policy in the local area, and go and then talk about where they've chosen to go, or actually is that too much for this group because they've not built enough confidence yet, and they've not they don't know each other that well yet. So it's that kind of feeling things out. But yeah, I think there's lots that goes into what makes a good facilitator, but I think it's such a valuable skill for economists to have.
Yeah, because I know that, I mean, I've been to place like workshops or at university even, where if they want active participation, it's so hard to get people to talk or to
Yeah.
do things in these sessions. So how do you go about making people more comfortable with active participation?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I guess, this is a question that I've thought about a bit when I was still doing more of the kind of curriculum reform stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think you just have to build it in from the start. It's not if you do like 90% of stuff that's lectures, I'm here, I have the knowledge, you're sitting there writing notes, absorbing it all. Then you ask people to do 10% of participation. It's not something people are comfortable with. It's not something people think or feel is expected of them. um, and so I feel like you have to flip it on its head and have quite a kind of different approach from the start, about a kind of different culture of learning about economics. And I guess that's what we do in our workshops. So unlike in a university, in our workshops, it's always that interactive approach, and it's always that sense of like it's self-education rather than education. It's like, as facilitators, we're not here to tell you loads of stuff. We're here to support you to learn on a kind of particular learning journey that's focused on things that matter to you. Um, Whereas that's not the case at university. It is more, this is the curriculum, this is what you need to learn, this is the toolkit of being an economist. And the main methods are lectures and seminars and problem sets, not participation and, you know, yeah, kind of drawing, yeah, from yourself and your experience and relating that to the things you're learning. So yeah, so, and then I think there are all sorts of innovative things you can do around, you know, building participation into assessment, and if that's the case, you know, and building it into, you know, courses on particular topics in economics. And if you do that, then you see participation as a skill to be developed and something that people need to do to pass and to get a good mark. And suddenly it's more effective than just asking people as an afterthought in a seminar to share their view.
Participation as a skill to be developed. That sounds really good. They should do that at universities too.
Nice. Well, I mean, hopefully, yeah. I think if rethinking economics is successful, and you know that's like an ongoing campaign, and you know things to change. But I think that would be part of that success.
So, have you seen changes from starting when you started till now in the workshops you've done? Have you seen changes in communities?
Yeah, I mean, massive. So it's interesting. I guess it's like different levels of change. So lovely, like from individuals who've come along, amazing kind of stories, and just people say that's really, you know, even that basic change from being like the economy's in London, it's a ball of money, it's controlled by people who like I have no connection with or influence over. They don't care, like they don't know who I am or represent my interests. You know, to go from that to being like, okay, the economy is around me, it's the things which do matter to me, and I don't, you know, and I feel like I understand that. Like that is an amazing shift to see in people. Um, and then, yeah, I think some of the stuff we do around people who are trying to kind of create change. So there's a group who are working on a universal basic income campaign at the moment, and that's, you know, an idea that's um, got a kind of specific role in the response to the pandemic. And the group are kind of got a petition and lots of signatures on it, and people are supporting it because it's an answer to, or yeah, a potential answer to their problems they're facing. But lots of those people don't feel able to, you know, if their friend or family said, what's UBI, or how can we afford UBI, they wouldn't feel able to explain that, and that is quite, you know, disempowering. And so for us to play a role in that and do workshops and live streams around, you know, the you know, what is it, how would it be afforded, what are the alternatives, you know, all of those kinds of questions, and support people if they want to be advocates for it, rather than just kind of people who have this feeling it might be good but not necessarily the confidence to, you know, actively actively advocate for it. So yeah, we're definitely, you know, at the top level, that kind of social change where we want to see government institutions, economic institutions, or local authorities changing the way they operate. We're not at that level. We're definitely at the level underneath of seeing really, yeah, just inspiring individual and group changes around who who is able to use economics to, pursue their interests, who has a legitimate voice in economics, how is, how are economic ideas generated and by whom and for what purpose. So yeah, there's lots going on at that level, and yes, adding that up now is the next challenge.
So when you come into a community, do you at which point do you often come in? Do you come in at the point where they know their the problem they're dealing with and they need a solution and they can't find the way there? Or do you sometimes even start before that, where you have to
Yeah.
start with making them aware of the problem or the things that exist that they don't even
Yeah.
realize are in
Yeah.
their way?
Yeah, we do both. So sometimes it's sometimes the group already has an issue. So this UBI thing, like this group were already campaigning for UBI, and so the aim was to help a broader like range of that group to act like to really engage with the topic rather than support it passively. Whereas other groups, we might work with a group in an area where that people come along because they have problems that they're facing in that area. You know, really everyday things like rubbish not being collected, or by the council, or you know, um, a school closing down and then having to move their kids to another school far away, really kind of things that people wouldn't necessarily think are kind of linked to the economy and how these decisions are made and what kind of budgets we have for, you know, education, and who makes decisions about those things. So um yeah, so those groups, it's much less action oriented because they've not come together as a group to do something. They're come together as a group who all live in a particular area. They might have quite different backgrounds, and it's got like a different dynamic, I think. And there, lots of the value comes from the community, people meeting other people they might not usually meet and talk to, having conversations that people wouldn't like. It's not normally the done thing to talk about these things. And sometimes action comes from that. Um, and that might if it's a community center, the community center might have things going on around particular issues that then the people in that can go off and join and participate in. But sometimes it doesn't, and I think we're very comfortable with that. Is we're not expecting everyone to go and become an activist, because that's not the only way you can use economics. You can use economics as an individual, you can use it as a consumer, you can use it as a citizen who's voting, you can use it as a as a saver, all sorts of different roles we play in the economy. And so it's not all about kind of the big change where you go off and do it. It's about all of those things too.
So, and with economy, you are the chief executive. So, how did that come about? And what do you need for the role, according to you?
um, how did it come about? Well, I was a trustee. So basically, to explain what a trustee is, Economy is a charity, registered in the UK, and charity is a particular form of legal structure, which basically means no one owns it, unlike a company. Um, and the idea is that charities work for the public interest, and the law defines 12 areas of public interest. And so our one is about advancing education in economics for the public benefit. Um, and then but then the way that charities are governed, because there isn't an owner, and because it's supposed to pursue this broader public benefit, not private interest, is that you have trustees. And trustees is a voluntary role, but they basically, as a group, they meet 4 times a year, and they have like top level oversight of the charity. And then often they'll recruit a director or a chief exec, and whose role they'll kind of delegate day-to-day running of the charity to that person and that team. So yeah, started off as a trustee, And we had two kind of co-founders, two kind of co-directors who ran economy for the first like three years or something like that. And then they moved on and did other things. And at that point, I was like, oh, actually, I'd really like to do this. I'd moved back down to London from Manchester, so I applied and got the role, which was great. And then the second part of that question, what do I do and what skills do you need? I guess so my role is there's a kind of role description which sets it out, but it's kind of some main areas. It's kind of like oversight of the charity. So there's governance. So I have to report back to the board and tell them about how things are going on, and so there's that link. There is finance, is a kind of overall responsibility for the day-to-day finances of the charity, making sure that we're spending our money, we're not spending it inappropriately, we've got the right appropriate financial controls and systems. There's funding, so there's making sure that we have enough money to employ the team and to do the stuff that we want to do. Quite closely related to funding is strategy. So below our mission, which is about supporting communities to shape the economy, to achieve what matters to them. Over the next 3 years, how do we achieve that? What resources do we need? What partners do we work with? What activities do we do? And so it's oversight of strategy. Again, all of these things aren't about doing it all yourself. It's about bringing the team together to have a team process. It's about talking with external partners, working out what's going on in the broader ecosystem, like it's about working out what the pandemic means for the work and how we have to shift and all of those things. So strategy, so governance, finance, funding, strategy, and I guess then there's a broader thing of like HR, culture, kind of making sure that the team, everyone we employ, and I guess under that there's kind of things like safeguarding, so making sure the people we work with are safe and that we've got the appropriate kind of things in place there to ensure that everybody in our like sphere of activity is safe. So I'm sure there are areas I've forgotten, but that's the kind of main things, I hope.
So
And the skills you need. I mean, I guess you need to kind of be interested in it and have a kind of quite a deep commitment. I think in a small organization, it's a difficult role. In a big organization, it is also a difficult role, but in different ways. I think in a small organization, you've got to kind of be everywhere and definitely takes a lot of energy. So having that real commitment is important, or belief in it, is not necessarily kind of it takes a lot. I think being strategic is important. So there's so much we could do, and lots of these things I don't think I necessarily have or do well, or I'm very much like learning. I think there's another thing about, as an organization that's trying to achieve change, one of the things that I've learned I feel is really important is about, I think when I came into this role and at Rethinking, I very much thought about change out there, change in the university, change in education, or change in society for economy. And actually, one of the things I've realized is it's really, really easy to reproduce the kind of things that you think are unhelpful out there, and you're trying to change out there within the organization. And so there's this real focus on culture, on diversity and inclusion, and on economics is very, it's male dominated. People from certain socio-economic backgrounds study economics. It's mainly in the UK, kind of largely white. It's not doesn't represent the diversity of wider society. And so it's easy, if we're just recruiting people, to have people who are interested in economics come and apply, but then we're not at all representing the diversity of the communities that we work with. And so there being a real need to invest time and energy, and to really connect the work we're doing out there with the work we're doing in, like, inside the organization, in terms of organizational development, and really needing to address the kind of same imbalances of economic power out there that we're trying to shift, within the organization. And it's really hard when you don't have many resources, when you've not got kind of established systems and processes. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of the job, if you want to do it well.
So, how do you create or maintain a safe company culture, a healthy company culture? What does that look like, and how do you do
um,
that?
well, I think you well, I mean, it's gained real relevance, really, hasn't it, over the last over the last year with the pandemic. It's like, really practically, like, how do you? So, I guess in the context we've had, it's trying to have really good and clear policies and processes for things, and that's hard as a startup, because you start with nothing, and it's like, okay, what do we do if people get sick? What do we do if people have an argument between each other? What do we do if, people act in a way that's, undermines the organization? So it's about developing those things and trying to make sure that in everything you do, you have the appropriate balance of individual interests and support, and that duty of care that you have to your staff and to your volunteers and to the people that you work with, and then also your organizational interest, what's best for the organization. And yeah, you really recognize that there are those different interests, and how they come through. I think also this thing about kind of needing to have policies and frameworks, but where judgment comes in, and needing to, if you treat everyone equally when people are unequal, in the sense that people coming from different backgrounds and have a different level of experience, or, then potentially you're reproducing those inequalities. So do certain people need particular support to be able to do their jobs? Making sure that you can resource that. you know Very practically, over the last year, we've had a really big focus on, like, mental health and well-being, because I think even before the pandemic, it was a big challenge for our generation, and something that it feels that loads of people struggle with, including the team, and including the broader communities that we work with. But then, obviously, the pandemic and lockdowns and the general grief and trauma that everyone well, not everyone, but lots of people are going through, then adds a whole extra layer to that. So, um, we've just tried to do, I guess it's always proportionate to the resources you have. And a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have had the resources to do this, but this year we've been able to pay for and subsidize either coaching or counseling as an offer for the team. Um, and so, yeah, I just think it's about kind of seeing what you can do, and thinking as ambitiously as you can. And some of the things, recognizing that you can't do them because of the constraints, but working out how you can build that into future plans, so that you can start to do that.
So, are there specific things that, like, constraints that come with running a charity? What are things that people probably don't know about working in a charity?
Mm. Are there specific constraints? Well, I mean, I think there's the constraint. It kind of just applies to small organizations, and yeah, kind of whether they're private or co-op or charity or whatever structure they are is that resources are constrained, and funding might last for a couple of years, and then it might, you might not be refunded. And so there is that kind of that there are real practical constraints, and in that context people might be trying to do lots of things and then not doing them well, and particularly the things around kind of culture and health and well-being. I think one of the things that we've benefited from in the pandemic is that we have grant funding. So we've got funding for 2 or 3 years from different trusts and foundations, and where where private businesses, where they rely on an income stream that and then had their activities disrupted by the pandemic, have had a financial crisis much more quickly than us, where our funders have been very flexible and said we'll carry on funding you and supporting you. So we might have that kind of financial crunch from the pandemic further down the line when it's harder to get more funding, but we have that bit of cushion and security now. Another thing I think is I guess what I mentioned earlier, is that charities are we have a kind of purpose, a public charitable purpose, and we have to show that our activity works towards that. We have to make sure that we're politically neutral, so we're not kind of saying to people, this is how you have to think about the economy. We're pluralist in our approach. Our aim is to support people to make independent judgments about which economic ideas and tools they support and or want to use, and to change the economy in ways that they want to rather than we want to. So we don't say you have to, this is the right way, this is the right policy. Or so I think that's an interesting bit about charities, and some organizations that wouldn't work for, but for what we're trying to do, that fits quite well.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, what is the iconocracy about? I hope I'm saying this.
Yeah, you said it very well. Yes. Shifting gears. Yeah, it was a book that 3 of us wrote. 3 members of the Post-Crash Economic Society wrote in 2000. It came out in 2016. It's iconocracy is economy and democracy stuck together. And the basic idea is that an iconocracy is a society in which the main aim of politics is to develop the economy. That's the kind of top goal. And all of the, any political party wants to get power has to say, we've got the best plan for the economy. You can trust us on the economy. And these political goals are framed around this particular idea of the economy as this kind of separate system, which is run, which is run by experts, by economists, who not run by, sorry, that's a wrong word, but needs experts to interpret it and to design policies for it. So a kind of technocratic approach rather than a more democratic approach. So yeah, so that's the kind of key idea of what an iconocracy is. And this book argues that we are in the UK and lots of countries increasingly living in iconocracies rather than democracies, where the economy is one goal, but there are many others. And we argue that's a negative state of affairs, that the economy should only be a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It's not actually the thing that matters to us. It's the things that enable us to do the other things that matter to us, like survive and, have flourishing lives, however we might define that. So that's the kind of start. And then we relate that back to economics education. And we did a curriculum review of 7 universities in the UK. And we basically showed that the way that economists are taught really kind of fits into and reinforces an econocracy. So it's very kind of narrow education training. We argued that it equated to indoctrination in neoclassical economics, because there was such little reference to broader perspectives and different ways of studying the economy, and that this was very much the kind of sole focus of economics education, and that then produced experts who didn't really see any value for democracy in economics. And so that was the second bit of the book, and then it broadened out. It looked a bit about how universities have changed over the years and how economics has become narrow over the years. And then it ended up by arguing that we need a different kind of economics. We need a pluralist, public interest economics, and we need a much more participatory economics. And obviously that's where the kind of work of economy, since we've been trying to kind of do more to flesh out what that would look like in practice and make it a reality rather than just an idea in a book.
So what was it like to write that book?
Long and hard at times. I think me and the two co-authors, Zach and Carl, all at different points found it really difficult. Mental health was definitely like a part of it, in the project, of just being like, are we ever going to get something done, something that we're happy with? But we did in the end, and I think now looking back at it, we're all really proud of it. I think, yeah, it was interesting because we wrote it as three people, and we, rather than taking like one chapter each, we all wrote all the chapters. So that was quite a kind of process, a kind of compromise, sometimes not compromise, sometimes argument. But I think that definitely made it stronger, because we each brought kind of different expertise and ideas to the book, and we were able to kind of stick them all together in a way that made it stronger rather than and I think the ultimate book wasn't a book that any of us could have done on our own, and so it kind of needed that kind of mix to come together.
That's really amazing. So with every guest, we do a little lightning round. So I say a question and you just say the first thing that comes up. Okay?
All right, sounds good. I'm
What
ready.
is the skill any economist should learn?
Facilitation.
Who do you admire or look up to in economics?
Oh, good question. Harjun Chang.
What is a question you want me to ask that I haven't asked you yet?
Oh, what do you do when you're not doing economics?
What is the answer to that?
I play football.
Nice.
Except when there's a lockdown, when I don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, or the things you're most enthusiastic about, if they want to learn more?
Just type economy into Google, and economy's website should be third or fourth from the top.
Nice. So what does the future of economics look like according to you?
Well, I think the next generation, I think all the rethinkers are really inspiring. I think the fact that the movement has just grown and become more, vocal and ambitious over the years is a big cause for optimism. I think there's a massive job. I think that the kind of economic knowledge we have today isn't good enough to address the big crises that our generation face, from environmental breakdown, kind of the stuff that we've seen around systemic racism, the kind of massive levels of inequality that we have, the kind of falling commitment among people to democracy, to the idea of democracy, this kind of sense that it doesn't really work as a system. So I feel like those things, economics needs to have much better answers to those kinds of questions. And while it's not fair to say that it's caused all those problems, it definitely, the narratives and the policies that we take from economics have definitely kind of contributed to this sense that there's a kind of parallel world that the world of economics doesn't describe or help us understand or help us make better the world that we actually live in today, and the world that we're inheriting and that we want to hopefully hand on to our kids. So yeah, big job.
So, what is your advice for future economists?
I think find yourself a place where you can kind of think and do. That one isn't enough without the other. That we all really, as economists, really need to be actively contributing to, doing things that address the big issues, challenges that we face. But doing is necessarily connected with thinking and rethinking and relearning and developing new ideas. So yeah, that combination of the two is crucial. It's not enough to just do, and it's not enough to just think in an ivory tower. We have to do both. So yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me.
A pleasure. Thank you, and good luck with everything with Rethinking Economics Netherlands.